we had Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the day that's unique between God and the Jewish people. Why? Because on Rosh Hashanah, all humanity, says all of mankind, all the nations, all the animals even, go before God and are judged that day. That's the day God takes stock of the entire world. Yom Kippur is a special part of the covenant between God and Israel. He gives them a day just between him and them to atone for all their sins. And Yaakov's strength is his prayer. Kol Yaakov. Remember, it was said about Jacob. Isaac said this about Jacob. Kol Yaakov. The voice is the voice of Jacob. That means Jacob's strength is prayer. V'adaimi de Esav. That means, yes, Esav uses his hands. He has the sword. But he's talking about Jacob here. That is, Jacob's major strength is when he uses the prayer and he grabs the sword out of Esav's hand, then he is powerful. But if you first, in those previous protests, take the sword out of Jacob's hands and give it back to Esav, and then when it comes time for Jacob to pray on Yom Kippur, and for whatever reason, people who have been taught sinas chinam for others is actually a mitzvah, so and they interrupt their prayers and do not allow for mass prayers to happen, Yaakov is left with nothing. He has neither the call of Yaakov, and certainly doesn't have Esav's sword to fight back, and he is left completely vulnerable. That's what we saw, and we have to remember this. We cannot allow this to happen. So we have national sins for which we have to atone. Before Rosh Hashanah, I called for example, the freeing of Amiram ben Uliel. That's what the higher-ups are supposed to have done. And if Jewish people are going to keep their brothers as prisoners, there are many others who are imprisoned entirely unfairly. If you do that, by the way, that's a form of kidnapping. Kidnapping a human being is one of the Sheva mitzvos for which a Gentile is put to death. It's also one for which Jews are put to death, but Jews only have to kidnap other Jews. By the way, yes, we have a situation of basically Jewish people being kidnapped and imprisoned. So it only makes sense now that we see Mida Keneged Mida. Jewish people have been taken prisoner by the enemy, have been kidnapped. What else? We interrupt prayer services, so God won't want to hear our prayers. If we do not allow for proper Jewish prayer, then God will not want to hear proper Jewish prayer. It's been, let's say, 18 years now since the Hitnatkud, since the disengagement. There's been many prime ministers, mostly Bibi, but there's been defense ministers, chiefs of staff. All of them have had the chance to eliminate the threats from Gaza and other places. We know about them. We've been adults, we've seen this, and they did not. There's a long list over here. I could say Netanyahu, Gantz, Ya'alon, Lapid, Bennett, Gallant, Lieberman, Ehud Barak. The list goes on. They've all failed miserably. It's just terrible. They've all had a chance to do this, and they haven't done it. So whatever happened on Shabbos, if it wasn't bemazed, was the single greatest act of criminal negligence in the Jewish people's history. Last night I put out that, if you look at this, this is basically what happened in the Holocaust. We're going to speak about that in a second. How is that? It's Holocaust-like because when the Nazis took power back in 1933, the rise of Hitler, so they start with anti-Semitism. They made life really bad, but only for the Jews who were under their control, first in Germany, and then there was the Anschluss, and they took over parts of what was then Czechoslovakia. So those Jews were subjected to very harsh treatment. There was already concentration camps, but the Germans hadn't hit upon a way to mass murder the Jews and destroy them. They were still trying to figure that out. And even when the war started, there was a few years of World War II, especially the invasion of Poland and other parts in Eastern Europe, where most of the Jews in the world lived, by the way. They still, with all their persecutions, didn't hit on a way to mass murder them. It was only when the Germans continued their war, invaded Soviet-controlled territory in the East, that they started the mass murder of Jews. This is in 1941, the spring of 1941. They had Einsatzgruppen, learn your history. They sent in armed German police divisions with guns just to shoot up all the Jews. And that was happening day after day. That's what the Holocaust was. The Holocaust was massacre of Jews day after day. What happened on Shabbos was basically that. See that other people in the media have jumped on this one. I was trying to point this out to them. That's basically what happened. So if you're wondering, how did the Holocaust happen? So let's see. We've actually seen this in our lifetimes. My father was born after World War II, around the time of the founding of the state. So people like us have never experienced these types of things. Do you remember the whole business we mentioned before? What did China virus teach us? How quickly people became turncoats on each other. People became snitches. They're calling the cops on their neighbors for not wearing masks or for walking with each other outside. They were so fast to want to turn against their neighbors. So I was shocked to see that. I only saw that among, like, let's say, three people, but it was still shocking to actually see that. But now you know how things were able to go about. You can have it in the Warsaw Ghetto. All you need is a small minority who are willing to collaborate. Okay, fine. But how did they start mass killing everybody? Well, you saw it yesterday. You actually saw a piece of the Holocaust yesterday. That's what the enemy wants to do to you. And how did it happen? Because those who have the capacity to do it, they've seized the means of self-defense for the most part from the regular people. The Jewish people are mostly defenseless. They have to rely on a government that's going to defend them, and the government is not going to defend them. And that's what happened. The Jewish people lacked any way to defend themselves. And the Holocaust in various places was only checked when force was used against them. The Germans had to close down every place where they were killing Jews. The Jews revolted. So there you go. Okay, now we're going to stop over here. That's what history has shown. So you got to see it. I think that this is the biggest tragedy of our lifetimes, that we saw a day like Shabbos, death squads, Nazi-like death squads, actually in the land of Israel, and they were unanswered. And there's some that are still active in the south of our land. So we have to know that we have a major act of teshuvah. Apparently, our Yom Kippur this past year was insufficient. Hold on 1 second. We have noise. Remember, if that's you, please mute yourself. Okay. Like I said, I'm calling for sometime this week, even God willing, the war were to end now. We still need to have another Yom Kippur. We need to correct a lot of the mistakes that we've made until this point.